Welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast with Darren Mitchell. If you're a sales leader looking to take your leadership to a whole new level, then this is the podcast for you. We'll be exploring tips, techniques, and strategies to help you take your leadership to the exceptional level and allow you to enjoy more money, more meaning, and better sales results. Welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast. And on this Friday, where I am in Melbourne, Australia, I have the absolute pleasure to welcome in all the way from Salt Lake City, Utah, the man who is the current co-founder and CEO of a company called Territ, and is a long-established history in business, Mr. Justin Shriber. Welcome to the
Darren, it's
podcast.
great to be on the show.
It's looking forward to this. We just had a bit of a brief conversation before we press record, and you've given me some really interesting topics to delve into today. One of which is what you describe as asymmetric growth, growing your top line, but at the same time reducing your costs. Which I'm thinking, man, that's utopia for most organizations, but
That's
really
the
hard to
dream of every
achieve.
company. That's right.
But we'll delve into that. But before we do, love to delve into a little bit of your background. So you've got an MBA, you've worked at LinkedIn, you started out at McKinsey's, and now you're the CEO and co-founder of Territ. Justin, where did it all start for you? And has sales and running businesses always been in your blood, or is it something that has just occurred in an evolutionary way over time?
Darren, I would say it started as a kid with a game called Mousetrap. I don't know if you're
Wow.
familiar with this
Yes.
game.
Yes.
It's kind of a Rube Goldberg machine that you have to build in order to get the marble from one side of the board to the other side of the board. I was fascinated as a kid because you had all these plastic parts and you had to hook them together, and the boot kicked the bucket, and the bucket sent the ball down a twisty staircase. And eventually, if you set it up right, you landed the ball exactly where you needed to land it. I think for me, what was fascinating about that is it was my first introduction to a system
Mm,
comprising multiple parts, but a system in service of achieving a specific outcome, which in the case of the game was getting that metal marble ball into the bucket at the end. And as I got into my career, first at McKinsey, I realized, wow, business is really about systems.
mm,
And the companies that are successful, the executives that are successful, they're all focused on that bucket at the end of the game board. And everything they do is about building the system to get the marble into that bucket. And I really started to get into not just sales or marketing or product, but how all of those functions interacted. So I decided to get an MBA. After I got my MBA, jumped into tech at Siebel, which for all of us old timers, we know it's the original CRM before
yes.
Salesforce.
Yes.
And that's what really got me excited about sales and selling. And so at Siebel, I was able to use technology to build essentially a Rube Goldberg machine to help people close deals faster. And over my career, I've had the opportunity to actually carry a bag, be the CMO, be the product guy, all in the process building these systems. And at the end of the day, I felt like at some point it was time to actually build my own company. I had a vision for what could actually be put in place to make sellers more effective at their craft. And that was the origin of Territ, the company that I co-founded with my co-founder, Amit Sastrikar.
Okay, love it. It's interesting you talk about like Siebel. I remember back when I was in corporate, running sales teams here in Australia, we used Siebel, and I remember giving feedback to our directors and saying we needed to make some changes. And the feedback that came back was, yeah, we can make those changes, but they're going to have a six-figure attachment cost to it. So deal with it, or
You
just
got to
use the
you
spreadsheet.
got to make money somehow. Got to make money somehow.
So one of the things that intrigued me there with your backstory there, Justin, is you've had multiple different experiences across, I guess, the supply chain, for want of a better term, in business. So you've carried the bag, you've run a sales team, you've been involved in obviously creating technology and so forth. Um, why do you think it is? Because a lot of sales teams, even today in 2026, for some reason have issues with maintaining CRMs or using CRMs as, I guess, the source of truth. What's your experience of that? Because I've got a certain view on why that is, but from your perspective across the businesses that you've been involved in, why do sales people and sales leaders not necessarily utilize the technology that's there as the source of truth?
I'd say there's two reasons for that. Number one, single point of failure. The traditional systems that we use to run sales are dependent on the data that flows into those systems, and that data is manually input by salespeople.
Mm,
Salespeople are the worst people on the planet at keeping systems updated with objective, complete information. I always joke around. I'd be out hiring salespeople and I'd look for the guy that could run through walls and break the rules and do whatever it took, obviously within ethical boundaries, but to get the
yep.
deal done. And then on the first day, you sit them down at a desk, you drop a binder on their desk, and you say, here's all the procedure and protocol you need to follow to keep your system up to date. What's wrong with that picture? And this is why nobody trusts CRM. Second issue is that the very people that are supposed to maintain the system get no value out of it. It's
Mm.
really a management tool so that managers and executives can figure out what's going on in sales. And when you connect those dots, dependent on the front line to complete the data, but create no value for them, you basically have, a complete mess in terms of the systems that you're trying to run sales on today.
Because it's interesting, and one of the things I know you've talked about in the past is about 60% of the data around real customer data sits outside of what now, or Salesforce as an example. And what makes it interesting is when you've got all the different stakeholders involved in particularly complex deals, what that means is a lot of the information is not easily attainable, so it has to be almost through word of mouth. It's amazing how actually things get done, and from a senior executive's point of view, how do they have, I guess, certainty that certain deals are going to be at certain stages of the purchasing cycle and gives them confidence? So now as the, I guess, the CEO of Terra, and we'll talk about specifically what you guys do, but if you were a CRO or a chief executive, what's the solution to that? Do we double down on the technology? Do we start to enforce compliance with those protocols that you alluded to? Or do we say, you know what we want is a sales team to go and get the deal because at the end of the day we need the revenue.
I think that Cursor is an amazing paradigm, obviously, for developers, essentially a tool that can be used as a human interface using natural language to be able to achieve outcomes in the case of developers building code.
Yeah.
The vision behind Terit is we need Cursor for sales. Sales, unlike any other function, is focused on verbal interactions, communications. And so the unlock here is to run the business using natural language and in a format that's intuitive to sales leaders. So basically, the premise behind Tarot is we give you an interface. You can interact with your data, ask it questions, ask the whys, get to the root cause, then tell it what to do. Love that insight, turn that into a process, update this system. And all of a sudden, you've got a tool that is fully automating all the tactical things we used to ask salespeople to do. It's creating value at every level, whether it's helping a rep to actually figure out what they need to do to get a deal done, or a RevOps leader to figure out what the root cause of the dropping win rate is, or an executive that's building a board preview. And that's all bundled together through a very intuitive interface that requires minimal learning to be able to adopt and deploy.
And what's the I guess receptibility, because it's another platform, it's another piece of software. How do you get over the hump of, hey, my Justin, my customer data is stuck in my spreadsheet?
So there's a couple things there. The first thing that you've got to do, I think the ultimate system, and I may be biased because I did start my career at McKinsey,
Yep.
but as Amit and I sat down to design this system, we said, imagine if you could have a McKinsey consultant that literally knew everything about your business. They had read all the email, every data warehouse entry, and they had this photographic memory so that at any moment they could recall it. And then alongside of that, imagine if you had an F1 caliber pit crew. so that
Mm,
anything the consultant said needed to be done, the F1 pit crew could basically implement with that level of precision. And those two elements coming together are really the two elements of the Terrat platform that we've built. On the McKinsey consultant, we've built what we call a revenue graph, which aggregates all the information, not just the stuff that's sitting in your CRM, but it could be an email or calendar or conversations, brings that all together and links it in a way that is cohesive. And then there's an execution engine on the back end of that, and the two feed each other. We like to call the first component, the McKinsey consultant, the AI architect. They're
hmm.
designing the systems, identifying the best practices. And then you've got the agents, that's the pit crew that actually puts those into action. It could be a call script that's delivered at the right moment. It could be a list of product features that need to be built that can be sent over to the product team. This is the executable that's able to take that, what used to be shelfware, the recommendation from McKinsey, and make it real.
And what's the impact on that? So in a large B2B sales organization where they're working on complex deals, you might have multiple different internal stakeholders working on the deal. So that's the pit crew. What have you seen in terms of shortening buying cycles, sales cycles, but also things like um, revenue margins, profitability?
Yeah.
Has it had it? Because it sounds to me like it takes a lot of the guesswork out, and it's based on science, based on data, and it's doing it really quickly, but with an accuracy of a highly trained McKinsey consultant and F1 crew.
Yeah. So there's two elements here. The first thing is you've got to figure out how to get more productivity out of each rep. That means each rep is delivering more revenue. And then the second thing you've got to do is figure out how to reduce the size of the organizations that are supporting sales and coming up with the all of the supporting materials required to drive a sales engine. So on the first problem, how do we increase the productivity of the sales team? Well, a lot of companies will hire really expensive consulting firms, and I've done this myself. It's not uncommon to spend 600 to $1 million on a consulting engagement that might last 6 months to study how you should sell, what the messaging should be.
Yeah.
The irony is every sales organization has a couple of rainmakers. These are the people quarter in and quarter out, they're closing the deals. When you ask them how they're closing the deals, they throw up their hands and they say, I don't know, I just sell. Like it's just what I do, right? They're not consultants, they're sellers.
Yeah.
However, we have the vapor trail from these people. We know all the conversations, we know all the emails, we know when they met with whom and what they talked about. So the agents can go in, these architects, and basically dissect what the best reps are doing and then codify that in the form of sales plays. So now you know how you should be performing. And then the second thing is actually getting the rest of the organization to follow suit.
Mm.
And the way that that works is I'm about to jump on a call, maybe I'm a junior rep, I'm just ramping. I get in my Slack 30 minutes before the call a very targeted call script that
Yeah.
says, okay, here's who you're meeting with. We understand the disposition of this person. Here's the kinds of objections you're going to get. Here's what the closers say. I literally have scripted out for me kind of a best call type scenario. As soon as I get off of that call, I immediately get feedback. Here's how you did. Here's what you did well. Here's what you didn't do well. So I'm reinforcing this set of best practices.
Mm.
By taking what your best sellers are doing and cascading that through the entire organization, you're now essentially creating a much tighter bell curve where everybody's performing at a higher level and therefore generating more rep per revenue. So that's the first part of the equation. Second part of the equation is how do you do it with fewer people? You don't need as many RevOps, product marketers, enablement people if all of these functions are being performed by the agents. And so what we're seeing now is that an organization, the ratios change. The
Mm.
ratio of managers to reps, the ratio of RevOps leaders or enablement leaders to rep, it gets smaller. The expenses get smaller while the revenue on the top line is continuing to grow.
So this is what you talk about being asymmetric growth.
That's right.
So using technology to, I guess, not so much, and we've got to be careful saying replacing headcount because when people are thinking AI, I think, oh my God, my job's going to be taken away by a bot, and therefore I'm going to be irrelevant. I'll end up being a Labrador, just just getting fed. But what you're talking about is efficiency and productivity. Because if we look at it and if we're really honest, most sales organizations have probably been quite inefficient over many years because we've got labor that is probably focused on certain elements, but they don't have the skill set across multiple different platforms. So we don't have the scale that we're taking advantage of.
Yeah, I call that the human middleware problem. You got a
Mm,
problem, go hire somebody to fix it. Got another
yeah,
problem, hire another person to fix it.
yeah.
Human middleware is not an efficient way to run a business, but we've been forced to follow that strategy in the past because technology has not delivered on its promises. To your point about reducing headcount, I'm seeing a couple of things. A lot of times there's actually latent demand locked up in the system. Man, I know that I would love to attack this new region. I just can't get to it right now. Or I think there's this opportunity I'd like to pursue, but I don't have enough heads. I got to go hire. So, what this solution allows you to do is free up some of those resources and redeploy them. You can potentially hire more reps and actually accelerate growth even more, but you can keep your headcount flat.
Mm,
So you're essentially growing into a new organization that has lower ratios. The reality is, and I think we need to be honest about this, some companies are overstaffed. They're
yeah.
looking to be lean and competitive. You're going to see those companies look at their bottom performers and say, honestly, we don't need those people anymore to perform the function. So, unfortunate in one sense, but the reality is you're continuing to make sure that every person that's in the organization is contributing at a high level. And now coupled with agents, they're going to be even more productive than before.
So, Justin, I wanted to ask you because I want to delve into some of the different roles in the sales cycle as well, in terms of how this is um, being approached. The technology that you're talking about with Terra, um, no technology conversation would be complete without asking the fundamental question of acceptance, buy-in versus rejection. Um, when you start, because I know the business is you started the business was a couple of years ago, correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Um, and I know we're in the world of AI now and technology, and there's a lot of organizations that are grappling with how to use the best technology. What has been some of the, I guess, the challenges that you've had to overcome, having the vision and having the McKinsey consultant and the F1 crew being able to put together and provide a great solution to organizations? What's been some of the challenges that you've had to overcome in order to get buy-in for this piece of technology, and how have you overcome it?
Well, I think that one question that people always have is, wow, I love the vision, but does it actually work? And we come from a world, and I've sold software for decades now, where we really are, I call it the trust me era. I'm going to show you a great demo, and you just need to trust me that when you deploy it, it's
It's
going to
going
be
to work.
phenomenal. And we all know how that story ends, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly what you said. Oh, yeah, we could customize that, but it's going to cost you another 250K. So I think one of the exciting things about the moment that we're in is we move from trust me to show me. We have a state in the United States, it's called Missouri, and the theme of Missouri, it's called the Show Me State.
Okay.
Uh, Folks in Missouri are known for their skepticism. They're not going to buy it, they want to see it. And we now live in a show me world. So what we'll do is we'll walk into a customer and we don't even really explain too much what we do. We'll give them a high level and then we'll say, let us plug into your CRM and your call data. And we'll come back literally in 48 hours and we will tell you something that you don't know about your business. If
Okay.
we can't actually show you something that you don't know, and keep in mind, we're talking to the head of RevOps, we're talking to the CRO. These people, if anybody knows their business, it's these folks. If we can't show you something that you didn't know, we don't need to continue the conversation. We come back, we say, hey, did you know that your win rates are falling in this region? And here's the reason why. And let me give you some specific evidence. When they see that, they're like, all right, good, you got me.
I trust you.
We need that. We need
Trust
that.
me.
Yeah. So I think that's the big one is moving from an era of trust me to show me.
Yeah. Yeah. And when that happens, so you've come back 48 hours later and the head of revenue ops has said, "My God, how could you do that? And why didn't my team already know that?" for me, that actually starts to embed, and we always talk about stickiness.
Hmm.
That starts to embed the solution and technology. It's then the challenge of getting the salespeople, and particularly even today, there's still some old school salespeople that refuse, for whatever reason, to use CRM. They're
Yeah.
just relying on the nose to nose, the toe to toe, and she'll be right, mate. Let's go and have a coffee. Um, you've got to have the buy-in. So talk to me a little bit about, okay, you've moved from the trust me to the show me. Now, because the rubber's really going to hit the road because you now want to see how this is embedded because you don't want to have them removing that piece of software down the track because you haven't got buy-in from the, I guess, the customer base, which is the sales teams.
Yeah. Um, a wise person once said, I don't know who said this, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. It was a very smart observation. The problem that we've had, and the reason that salespeople don't adopt technology is because we're constantly asking them to step outside of the way that they like to work. Come over and log into this application, and then go over there and log into that application. And
Mm,
at the end of the day, reps are going to do what they're going to do. So when in Rome, behave like a salesperson. Figure out where it is that they hang out, where they do the things that they do, and then be present. And not only be present, but be relevant.
mm,
So I mentioned before, you're about to go into a sales call. A lot of organizations right now use Slack. It's how they
yeah.
exchange information. It's a very common tool for them. We can use Slack and we can light up that Slack channel 30 minutes before. And I know now because I'm conditioned that 30 minutes before I just have to look at my Slack and I've got this very beautiful artifact that lays out the plan for me in detail. So that's an example of where I've met the salesperson where they are and how they like to do work in the flow of work. You got
Mm,
some, and this is often the case for managers that may have been around for a little bit longer. They're still stuck in the email world. I'm probably one of those people, and not a problem. If you like to get your information through email, we can deliver that to you through email. So this idea of having this standalone application that's isolated from everything else, and that's the only place, that's kind of history. And
mm.
now it's all about meeting you where you like to hang out.
And the good thing about that is getting buy-in from a salesperson where they don't have to go to multiple applications, but you actually start to present the information in the platforms that they currently use is a really clever way of actually getting almost buy-in without actually asking for buy-in, particularly when
Yeah.
they get to see that the information that's being presented is relevant. And when they use that information in a customer interaction, it delivers the result that they probably wouldn't have been able to get had they have just gone in and used their old methodologies.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I often like to say that it's time to disable enablement.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that, and again, I'm as guilty as any other sales leader for this, but the way that we traditionally enable salespeople is it's SKO. We get everybody to a beautiful hotel and we lock them in a room and we hammer them for 8 hours straight. And here's the new playbook, and here's the new pitch. And then we do some kind of a fun contest at the end. And then what happens? Everybody goes to the bar and they drink away all of that stuff that you just tried to cram into their brain. And literally the next morning, they're basically 1% better than
Yep.
they were, at the last session. And then we wonder why people aren't adopting these new practices and techniques. And the thing that kills the enablement team is they're like, man, I took 6 months to put those materials together and
Yep.
nobody's even using them.
Mm,
So disable enablement, I think the new paradigm there is what I like to call micro enablement. That's where you're able to really quickly generate materials, whether it's a playbook or how you handle objections in real time based on what's happening in the field. And then as a rep, I just get a micro enablement moment. Maybe it's before I jump on a call or it's right when I get off the call, where you're packaging up the relevant information that is applicable in that moment. And then you repeat that every call, every coaching session. And what ends up happening is rather than trying to cram it all into an 8 hour session at the beginning of the year, I get
mm.
maybe 5 minutes, but I get it repeated 10 times a week over the course of the entire year. My retention is so much better, and my ability to apply that goes up so much higher. And
Yep.
ironically, I'm using far fewer resources to deliver that.
And the adoption rate just goes through the roof because when people see it and they use it and they get the result, they want more of it.
Yeah, that's right.
Particularly if
That's
it
right.
makes a salesperson's job easier. Because the other thing I was going to say as well is there's a lot of narrative out there that is talking about AI and having almost AI replace the person in certain elements of a sales cycle. What we're saying is that the human to human interaction is still going to be pertinent, particularly in B2B and particularly in complex
Yeah.
sales. But it's the utilization, the leverage of the technology that's going to enable that connection to be even deeper, more sticky, and hopefully longer revenue lines and higher profitability over time.
Yeah. Salespeople are social animals. And while they don't necessarily want to see a document with a color by numbers list of things they're supposed to do, that kind of is anathema to how they're wired.
Yeah.
They're always talking to each other. Hey, what did you say? This guy said this. How did you respond to that? They're curious and they're competitive because if their colleague is able to navigate past a particular issue that they're having trouble with, they want to know how to do that. And so they're
Mm,
going to find out about that. One of the cool things about AI is this isn't about creating a prescribed list of steps necessarily. It's about giving them the language, it's about giving them the tactics that are extracted from their colleagues. And they're inherently interested in that. And so suddenly you have their attention and they want to understand that and they want to apply that in the deals.
mm, absolutely. I love that. Now, with all of this, I'm just thinking, going back to my sales leadership days and all the work that I had to do as a sales leader, including all the compliance and all the reporting and stuff like that. But can you talk a little bit about how you see the evolution of the sales manager, the frontline sales manager's role,
Yeah.
particularly when it comes to coaching, mentoring, best practices? Because I can see a lot of this technology will be doing a lot of the heavy lifting for the sales reps.
Yeah.
How do you see the role of the sales leader, the frontline sales leader, changing, and still obviously being relevant, but changing in the midst of this technology revolution, and particularly AI?
Yeah. I've thought a lot about this topic. I like to label the manager of the future the bionic manager.
The
I don't know, in
bionic
Australia growing
manager.
up, did you guys have the bionic man and the
Yes,
bionic
we had the
woman?
$6 million man. Absolutely.
Steve Austin. I love
Yes.
that guy. Like he could see farther than anybody else, and Jamie Summers could hear farther than anybody else. This is the future of management. If you think about what a management call looks like today or a coaching call, if we're going to be honest, it is 90% me as a manager asking you questions to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
And maybe 5 to 10% giving you some advice based on a cobbled together picture that I've collected. So the bionic manager walks in and they already have full purview over every conversation you've had, what you did well, what you didn't do well. How do they know that? Well, the agent in the background is collecting all of the signal from the calls. It's analyzing them. It's comparing them to this best practice playbook. And then for the manager, it's prepared a tear sheet that breaks down, all right, here's what Darren is exceptional at, and here's some evidence. Here's where he really needs to double down and improve his game, and here's some evidence. And here are three specific tactical things he can do in the coming week.
Yeah.
Now I sit down with you, Darren, and I'm like, hey, Darren, you crushed that last call. I'm particularly impressed by the way you did discovery. This question that you asked really unlocked it. And you're like, whoa, were you in that call? Well, bionic manager. You hear everything. And then you're like, but Darren, we got to talk about your closing skills.
Yeah.
You did not ask for the business. And here's where it cost you. You were in the Acme deal. You had that person where you needed them and you didn't ask for the business. So in your next week's meeting, you've got a meeting with such and such an account. I want you to ask for the business.
Mm.
And then you can follow up with that. That's the example of a bionic manager that's able to hear, to see, and to be very precision about the conversation that they're driving.
It's such an important point because more and more, and one of the reasons, full transparency, one of the reasons I got out of sales management, sales leadership was because of particularly in a big organization, the over expectation of administration and the forecasting and all the internal reporting. And
Yeah.
it took time away from working with the sales team to actually develop them, help them close, right? And I didn't
Yeah.
have access to things like Terra back then. It was me literally listening to calls or being in person face-to-face meetings and taking notes and then providing coaching from that. So it's changed.
I don't think any of us get into management because we relish the opportunity to fill out a form. Nobody, nobody as a kid says, when I grow up, I want to be a form filler. But that's kind of what management is, right? At the
Yes.
at the same time, real great leaders and coaches, I wouldn't call them managers, I'd call them coaches. They love being on the field and seeing things and helping the players. And there's an inherent satisfaction that comes when you see somebody do something that they weren't doing before, and you know it's because of the conversations you were having. We
Yeah.
need more of that, and we need to be able to unlock the time of the managers so that they can focus on those things and take all that administrivia off of their plate.
Yeah.
We can handle that. We can automate that now.
Yeah, yeah. Just on that, one of the questions I had as you were talking, the recording part and man, the Bionic manager. How does Terra work when you've got because there's still a lot of face-to-face meetings that happen in business. How does that work? Because I know it can work very well with obviously Teams calls and Zoom calls and all the technology around that, recording calls and so forth. But how does it integrate with the face to face? Because I know that a lot of salespeople will go out and have a face to face meeting with a key contact. They might take some handwritten notes, but I don't know many salespeople that actually record on their device the meeting.
Yeah, so the technology is available. You can record on your device, and then that recording can be fed into our revenue graph and becomes accessible. I'll acknowledge that there's a cultural shift that needs to happen because in many circles, people are still uncomfortable with that. Although I would simply point to what's happened with the virtual meetings that we're on. Initially people were a little bit hesitant when the meetings were recorded. These bots started to join, and at first people were like, hey, what's going on with that bot? We don't even pay attention now. And on many calls, we have more bots on the call than we have humans. And it's just kind of the way that you work. And I think honestly, people realize the value in that. If I'm a prospect, I want you to record this conversation because it's going to mean you're going to be more relevant to me. So I
Mm,
think it's about the setup. If I'm meeting face to face, I'm going to be upfront and say, hey, I'd love to record this conversation because you're going to say some things that I want to remember. And I want to make sure that subsequent conversations are relevant. Are you okay
yeah,
with that?
yeah.
When I've prefaced it like that, I haven't had anybody say no.
And I think that's the key thing, Justin. It's just asking for permission, right? Because
Yeah,
I know from my own experience, being able to capture absolutely everything a chief revenue officer or a chief information officer said and writing it down, there's obviously mistranslations and so forth. So what they actually said is not necessarily what I write down. So having that as a source of truth is a great way because it means we're adding better service and we're going to provide services and solutions that are more relevant to the customer.
that's right.
I love
Yep.
that. So that's talking about the sales leader, the frontline sales leader, and I do want to ask you a futuristic question in a second as well. But the chief revenue officer, so the senior sales leaders that are in business right now and will continue to play a pivotal role in the evolution of business. How does their role change with that? Because
Yeah.
often they're setting strategy, they're doing the executive alignment and stuff, so forth. But what's the evolution that you're seeing in that particular role?
Yeah, it's a role that's really being upended. If I had to boil it down, I'd say CROs of the future, Miles Davis, CROs of the past, Lenny Bernstein. And what I mean by that is, obviously Lenny Bernstein, one of the great conductors, basically his job was to form this unit that performed music at a level that no one else could achieve. He had a musical score, he had an orchestra, everyone knew exactly what their part was, and the precision with which they could deliver that, and obviously there was the feeling that went into it as well.
Yeah,
That's what made the Lenny Bernstein experience singular. That's what a CRO used to do. They defined the playbook, and the degree to which they could execute against the playbook, the sales organization defined success or failure. We now live in a much more fluid environment. The marketplace is moving. Our competitors are moving. There's no more musical score that you can rehearse for a year and drive to perfection. And that's why I say we need Miles Davis now. Miles
mm,
Davis was a band leader. He had a loose framework that his band used, but he could also hear the signal. And
Mm.
when the flow started and the band started to go in a certain direction, he didn't fight that. He went with that.
Yeah.
And so the CROs now need to have real-time signal and they need to have the agility to move the organization with that signal as it moves. And that's why you can't spend 6 months anymore building a playbook. You can't spend a quarter doing a competitive teardown. I need this information ASAP, and then I need an ability to pivot my organization to be able to follow that signal as it moves.
Which, coming back to your analogy around the SKO, we can't afford to spend 6 months preparing that playbook to present to this SKO because we need to be able to do it incrementally as we go through because it may change. Because
Yeah,
circumstances might change, industry might change, technology may change again.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Miles Davis needs a different set of technologies than Lenny Bernstein needed to be
Yeah.
successful.
So what I hear there is it's the behavioral flexibility of a senior leader that can pivot and see the signals, but take advantage of those signals because it's going to be relevant for driving more value, not just for their customers, but more importantly, internally for their organization to make sure they set themselves up for success.
And not only are they flexible and agile themselves, but they have the mechanisms in place to move the organization. You know, one of the challenges with trying to move quickly, especially as the organization gets larger, is that organization you can whipsaw it very easily, and you can move to a state of confusion literally like that.
Mm,
So being able to, in a systematic way, move the organization, but do it quickly. That's the key. And that's where that micro enablement comes in. If I'm conditioned to go to my Slack 30 minutes before a call, and that script that I'm getting is evolving with the marketplace, and maybe there's some new information about concerns or objections that are there that weren't there before, that to me isn't disruptive. That's
mm.
part of my motion. I can adapt to that, and it's helping me to be very agile. On the other hand, if you have to take me out of the field every week and say, okay, here's the playbook now. Sorry, guys, the playbook changed again. Here's a new document, and I get a new binder every week. That's not going to fly.
No, no, you get because you're gonna get rejection.
Yeah.
But that's when people will go back to, mate, I'm going to use my spreadsheet because it served me well up until this point. So,
You get people nodding, saying, sure, we'll do that. I've heard that many times. Sellers are
yeah,
never going to tell you no,
no,
but
that's
sellers are going to
right.
sell, right?
Yeah. And then the problem with that, of course, Justin, is it becomes the sales enablement and all the playbook becomes more of a focus of compliance
Yeah.
as compared to enablement. And as we're talking, and there's this thing that keeps popping into my head, whatever we do, we've got to help make it easier for our sales professionals to deliver the value because it's almost like what is the fastest route from discovery to conversion? So, how do I get revenue on the books as quickly as possible? And how do I keep that revenue on my books for as long as possible? And so, I've got to make it as easy as possible and as adaptive as possible so that salespeople are going to want to actually adapt it and embed it.
I love that comment. It actually reminds me of a conversation I had with a seller the other day. And I said, what's your objective? And he said, I want to get to the point where I can execute my playbook so well that my manager says to me, you were perfect.
Yeah.
And I said, that's not the goal of a salesperson. The goal of a salesperson is to close revenue.
Yes.
You are focused on executing the playbook when you should be focused on closing the deal. And I said, you need to go through a shift here. You're essentially viewing yourself as a private foot soldier in the army that is executing a set of orders perfectly. You need
Mm.
to think of yourself, American football as a running back that is getting the ball to the end zone and knows how to move through the line of scrimmage
Yeah.
and appropriately read and go from point A to point B as fast as possible. And again, that's the environment that we're in, and that's getting people out of the mindset of perfect execution on a predefined playbook and into the mindset of the fluidity to read what's going on in the marketplace and as expediently as possible get to the end goal.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. It's just it's a no-brainer for me. But hey, maybe I'm biased. Maybe I'm biased. So Justin, hey, this has been a great conversation. Really enjoyed this. No conversation around technology and sales and evolution of sales would be complete without asking you, in your position as co-founder and CEO of Terra, um, to cast your mind forward. Now, I'm sure you're doing this as part of the strategy and the visioning for the business, but from your perspective and what you're seeing in the marketplace, if you project it out, say 12 months, 24 months, what do you see in particularly B2B sales in terms of the future? What's the future gonna hold? Are we gonna have more and more pieces of technology, more and more people in running sales because we can actually leverage revenue even further? What's your view of the future of sales?
Yeah, I think we've kind of touched upon components across the conversation, but it's going to be organizations led by Miles Davis that are agile and moving quickly, that are able to evolve and are built on an organization that is much smaller and more efficient in terms of the support. And at the end of the day, what that means is I think sales cycles are going to get shorter
Mm,
because we're going to get to the point a lot faster of what people care about. I think that or reps are going to be able to carry a bigger number, so you're going to need fewer sellers, but they are going to be excellent at what they do. And I think that from a margin perspective, we're going to see an expansion in margins because companies are going to get a lot more efficient at building out the underlying infrastructure that they need to deliver an outstanding customer experience.
I love that. And I'm sure Terrat is going to be in the forefront of all of that.
That's the
Global
goal.
domination,
That's the
my friend,
goal.
right? Global domination.
As you can tell, I'm passionate about the subject. And this is the tool that I always wanted when I was in sales. And so it's near and dear to my heart because it really is a passion project.
And it's just anything that, as I said before, enables a salesperson, a seller, to get to the revenue line as quickly as possible, ethically, with stickiness and with customer interaction to the point where the customers love it and want to keep coming back, has to be, well, as we say in Australia, an absolute no-brainer.
Yeah, yeah, that's the
Yeah.
sweet spot.
Yeah. Mate, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. People who are listening to this, whether they be salespeople thinking about moving into a sales leadership role, chief revenue officers, because we've got a whole gamut of different people that listen to this podcast. If they're interested in connecting with you, first of all, but also learning a little bit more about Terrat, where's the best place for them to do that?
I'm very active on LinkedIn. DM me, and I'm happy to strike up a conversation. If you want to learn more about what we do, hit our website. We're constantly updating it, whether it's what we do or great resources and thought leadership. You'll find it all there. Tarot.ai.
Brilliant. Mate, thank you. And I'm going to leave you the final word. So if there's anything that is top of mind that perhaps we haven't covered that we you'd wanted to cover, whether it be something personal, something technology based, just a word of wisdom to leave the audience as we wrap up.
I think that you touched upon this. Sales is an honorable profession, and people that excel at it are the people that are focused on the customer experience. I am excited about the fact that whereas technology used to divide individuals, I think it's going to bring people even closer together. And for that reason, I look forward to the future and the outlook on sales with a lot of optimism.
Brilliant. Could not have said that better myself. You're a man after my own heart. So I'm glad you finished the podcast with that. So thank you so much. And thanks for being a great guest on the podcast today.
Darren, it's been a great conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, mate. Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast. I trust the information in this episode has been helpful in your journey towards becoming exceptional. And remember, please take the time to rate the show, subscribe to the show so other people can find it. But also, if I can help you, jump on my calendar, go to leadwithdarren.com and let's have a conversation about how I can help you along your journey to being exceptional.